Turning 40. Changed everything. The day I realized my family had been hiding secrets. The countdown to 40. Ryan Donovan had always considered himself a simple man. Life for him had been a steady rhythm of work, family, and quiet moments of reflection. He wasn't one to ask for much. He had a solid job as a construction supervisor, a modest but comfortable house that he had worked hard to pay off, and 2 children, Ethan and Sophie, who made his life meaningful. His wife, Laura. Well, she had always been a presence in his life, a constant, sometimes unpredictable, but always there. Turning 40 was supposed to be just another number. Another day. Another year. Older. Sure, but nothing that would disrupt the foundation of the life he had built. But for some reason, this birthday felt different. It felt like there was something brewing beneath the surface, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. It was a feeling he couldn't ignore. For weeks, Laura had been acting strangely. Her usual lighthearted energy was tinged with mystery. It started with little things, playful hints, dropped casually at the dinner table, her eyes twinkling as if she were holding on to some secret. "Just wait, Ryan. Something big is coming," she would say with that smile that always seemed to hide something deeper. At first, Ryan thought nothing of it. Perhaps she was planning a surprise party or a getaway. After all, turning 40 was a milestone, wasn't it? The thought of a grand celebration, maybe a nice dinner out or even a small gesture to mark the occasion seemed fitting. He let the idea grow in his mind, savoring the spark of excitement that came with it. But then even Sophie and Ethan, his 2 kids who were often caught up in their own worlds, started acting strange. Sophie, his 19-year-old daughter, would nudge him with a wink at the dinner table. "Dad, what's your favorite cake flavor?" she'd ask, her voice laced with what Ryan could only describe as mischievous curiosity. Ethan, who was now 21, was even more cryptic. He checked Ryan's work schedule on multiple occasions, as if mapping out the exact times he would be home. Ryan couldn't help but wonder, were they all in on this? Were they planning something special for him? As his 40th birthday grew nearer, the anticipation built. He pictured balloons, laughter, maybe a few close friends joining for a celebration. He wasn't the type to expect grand gestures, but the thought of his family doing something, anything, felt good. After years of working late nights and endless weekends, this small token of appreciation was all he wanted. He didn't need much, just a sign that they cared. Laura kept dropping those hints, and Ryan felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they would make his birthday special. The day finally came, March 29th, 2025. Ryan left his construction site, his boots covered in dust, but his heart a little lighter with each step. He pulled into the driveway of the house that had been his home for over 15 years. The evening sun cast a golden glow over everything. Ryan stopped for a moment in the driver's seat, taking a deep breath. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. "Don't get too excited," he muttered to himself. "Don't set yourself up for disappointment." He grabbed his lunchbox and stepped out of the truck, his boots crunching on the gravel as he made his way to the front door. The house, which had always been a place of warmth, seemed unusually still. As he turned the key in the lock and pushed the door open, he expected the usual sounds of family life, the hum of the fridge, the faint murmur of the TV in the living room, and maybe, just maybe, the smell of something cooking in the kitchen. But there was nothing. No laughter, no voices, no music. The house felt empty, dead quiet. Ryan stepped inside the door, closing behind him with a soft click. He turned on the light, half expecting someone to jump out and shout, "Surprise!" But the light flickered on to reveal the truth, an ordinary, silent home. The living room was bare. No decorations, no balloons, no banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Ryan." The kitchen counter was spotless and the TV was off. No cake, no presents, no mess of family preparing for a party. Ryan's heart sank. His stomach twisted. He stood there for a moment, his mind racing. Maybe they were running late. Maybe they had to get something last minute. Maybe they were on their way back and he'd be surprised after all. But deep down, he knew something wasn't right. His phone remained silent in his pocket. No texts, no calls, no message saying, "We're sorry, we're just a little late." Ryan walked through the house, the sound of his boots echoing on the hardwood floor. Up the stairs past Sophie's room where the lavender-scented air still lingered, but her backpack was gone. Maddox's sneakers weren't by the door either, and Laura's purse, which was always left on the hall table, was nowhere to be seen. His stomach tightened. He checked the garage. Her car was gone. Ryan stood still for a moment, feeling the weight of silence press against him. The house was too quiet, too empty. His heart dropped and the small flicker of hope he'd held on to extinguished. They weren't coming. Not tonight. Not for him. He felt like a fool for believing in it, believing in them. The family he had tried so hard to provide for, to care for, was nowhere to be found on the one day that was supposed to matter. He sat down on the couch, still in his dusty jacket, and stared at the blank TV screen. The weight of 40 years settled heavily on him. This wasn't how he'd imagined his milestone. Not like this. With a long sigh, Ryan reached into the fridge, pulled out a beer, and cracked it open. The bitter taste matched the aching emptiness that spread through his chest. As the minutes ticked by, he felt the cold truth settling in. He wasn't important enough for them to care. They had forgotten. The night stretched on a relentless reminder of what wasn't, and for the first time in a long while, Ryan understood something painful. Family wasn't always what it seemed. And today, on his 40th birthday, he was reminded of how easily he had been pushed aside, as the hours wore on with no sign of anyone returning. Ryan let the anger build, but it wasn't the loud, chaotic kind of anger. It was quieter, steady, the kind of anger that simmered beneath the surface, just waiting for the right moment to be released. Tomorrow would be the day things changed, what I didn't see coming. The days leading up to my 40th birthday were a blur of little oddities, whispers, and things left unsaid. At first I didn't think much of it. I was used to the usual small talk in the house, the little questions, the nudge from my wife Emma as we prepared for another day. But the closer my birthday got, the more I felt like something was off. Emma, who was usually the practical one, kept dropping these cryptic little hints. "Just wait, something big is coming," she'd say, smiling like she was hiding some sort of grand secret. Her brown eyes always sparkled when she said it, like she knew something I didn't, and I hated not knowing what that was. At first I thought she was just being playful. It wasn't unusual for her to get excited about small surprises, maybe a nice dinner or a family gathering at our favorite restaurant. But it didn't stop there. Every time we sat down for dinner, my daughter Mia would ask random, peculiar questions like, "What's your favorite cake flavor, Dad?" Or, "Do you like surprises?" It all seemed harmless at first, but there was something in the way she asked, like she was trying to piece together the perfect plan, one I wasn't supposed to catch on to. And then there was my son Alex. He was always the quiet one, the kind who kept to himself, but lately he'd been a little more involved than usual. He asked about my work schedule, making sure I'd be home on the 29th, my birthday. It wasn't typical of him to care about such details, so I found myself wondering what he was up to. A surprise party, I kept telling myself to stop overthinking it, but deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. For days I kept waiting for the big reveal. I pictured the living room full of balloons, a banner reading "Happy 40th," maybe even a cake with a giant number 40 on it. I let myself get excited about it. After all, I deserved it, right? 40 years of life, family, work challenges. I thought I was owed something special. But as the 29th approached, I began to feel a strange unease bubbling up. It wasn't just the mystery of the something big that was supposed to come my way. It was the way Emma and the kids kept acting. The way they smiled too brightly, the way Mia kept giving me those knowing looks. I started to wonder if I had become just a pawn in their game, a puzzle they were working to complete without my knowledge. It wasn't until the day before my birthday that the little signs began to come together in my head. Mia, who had never cared much about cake or parties, suddenly asked me what kind of birthday cake I liked best. Alex checked to see if I'd be around on the 29th. Emma kept grinning, but it wasn't the kind of grin that made me feel loved or appreciated. It was the grin of someone who was hiding something big, something they thought I wouldn't notice. That night I sat with Emma, trying to ignore the growing discomfort I felt in my stomach. I wanted to ask her what was going on, to just come out and say, "Emma, what's the surprise?" But I held back. Maybe it was just me overthinking things. Maybe they were planning a simple dinner or a small celebration. After all, my family didn't throw big parties. That wasn't our style. Still, something inside me kept whispering that the surprises were stacking up. The quiet tension, the little hints, the strange way Emma and the kids had been behaving. It all seemed too calculated, too deliberate. I had no idea what was coming, but I was starting to feel like I should. As I lay in bed that night, my mind raced with possibilities. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that I was just being paranoid. But the next day, when the clock struck noon and the sun rose higher, I felt the weight of expectation hanging over me. Tomorrow I would turn 40, and Emma kept saying, "Just wait. Something big is coming." I had no idea how big or how much it would change everything. Expectations versus reality. March 29th. The day I had been quietly anticipating for weeks was finally here. My 40th birthday. The sun rose slowly, casting a warm glow through the curtains. For a moment, I allowed myself to enjoy the peace, the quiet before what I thought would be a celebration of all that I had achieved, of the years I'd spent raising a family, building a life. A small smile tugged at my lips as I imagined the surprise that Emma, Mia, and Alex had been so cryptically hinting at. Maybe it would be a little party after all. I went about my morning routine, trying to push away the mounting anxiety that had settled in my chest over the past few days. My work boots thudded on the hardwood floor as I moved through the house, getting ready for the day. As I passed by the kitchen, I glanced at the counter, half expecting to see balloons or a card waiting for me. Nothing. I paused for a moment, my stomach tightening. Maybe they were just waiting until after work to do something. Perhaps they wanted to surprise me when I got home. I told myself it was fine. No big deal. I didn't need anything extravagant. Just a little acknowledgement. A token of appreciation. A happy birthday would be enough. But as I left for work, the doubt began to creep in. Emma had been acting so mysterious. Mia and Alex had seemed too rehearsed, like they were playing roles in a well-scripted plan. I tried not to think about it too much, but deep down, a part of me was beginning to feel uneasy. The whole day passed in a blur of construction meetings, site visits, and endless emails. My mind kept wandering back to my family, wondering if they were getting everything ready. I'd promised myself that I wouldn't expect too much, that I wouldn't let my mind run wild. But as the day wore on, I found myself growing more anxious with each passing hour. I had always been a patient man, but this was different. It was my 40th birthday, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Finally, the workday came to an end. I left the site, the hum of construction equipment still lingering in my ears as I got into my truck. My mind buzzed with anticipation. I didn't need a grand celebration, just a warm meal with my family, a cake, some laughter. That was all I wanted. It didn't have to be perfect, but it had to be something. I pulled into the driveway, my heart beating a little faster now. As I stepped out of the truck, I looked at the house. The porch lights were on. The windows were bright, but there was no sign of any party. No decorations, no balloons. My stomach twisted into a knot, but I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe it was just running late. I took a deep breath and walked toward the door. I turned the key, pushed it open, and stepped inside. The house was eerily silent. I blinked in confusion. The faint smell of dinner wasn't in the air. There was no sound of laughter, no music playing, no happy greetings waiting for me. The house was empty. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence wash over me. No warm embrace, no shouts of surprise, no family to greet me. I checked the living room, the kitchen, and then the upstairs. Mia's room was empty. Alex's sneakers weren't by the door. Emma's purse wasn't on the hall table. My stomach dropped. It was like they had all vanished. I grabbed my phone, expecting at least a text, a call, something. But there was nothing. The screen remained blank. I walked around the house, checking every room, looking for some sign that they were just out for a moment. But nothing. The house felt cold, unfamiliar. My heart sank. I had spent weeks imagining this moment, hoping for something to mark my milestone for my family, to show me that I mattered. But instead, I was met with an empty home and the bitter realization that I was forgotten. I took a seat on the couch, my boots heavy on the hardwood floor. The minutes ticked by, but still no one came home. No texts, no phone calls. My birthday had come and gone, and I was alone. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my thoughts racing. How could they forget? How could they let me down like this? I tried to tell myself it was just a mistake, that they were out running errands or making last-minute preparations. But deep down I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was something far worse. I wasn't even worth the effort to acknowledge. The silence pressed down on me, suffocating me. I opened a beer, hoping the cold, bitter taste would dull the sharp ache in my chest. The bottle clinked against the edge of the glass, but it didn't soothe me. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent all these years doing everything for my family, putting their needs above my own. And now, on my 40th birthday, I was invisible. I took another drink, the sharp sting of alcohol cutting through the bitterness. But it didn't change the truth. I wasn't worth the time, the attention, or even the simplest acknowledgement from the people I loved the most. And then as I stared at the empty walls, I heard a ping, a notification. I grabbed my phone, hoping for some sign, a message, anything that could pull me out of the darkness. It was a picture on Instagram. A picture of Emma, Mia, and Alex all grinning on a beach. A place I had never seen. A place I was not. The caption made my stomach churn. "He won't even notice we're gone. Lol." I stared at the screen, disbelief freezing me in place. They had planned this. The whole thing. They knew what they were doing, and they thought it was funny. The painful realization, confronting the truth. The words on the screen kept flashing before my eyes, the sting of them deepening with every passing second. "He won't even notice we're gone." LOL. I sat there holding my phone as if the screen might shatter from the weight of the truth sinking in. They weren't just thoughtless. They hadn't forgotten. No, they had planned this. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was intentional, a cruel joke at my expense. I felt a wave of heat rise to my face, but it wasn't the anger I expected. It was something deeper, colder, betrayal. The kind of betrayal that comes from the people you trust the most, the ones who should have your back, the ones who should have been there when you needed them the most. I could barely swallow as I picked up the whiskey bottle from the counter. I had intended to avoid it. I had tried to be strong today, tried to tell myself that I didn't need the extra pain, but I knew what I had to do. I poured a glass. No ice, no mix, just the raw burn. It felt like the only thing capable of numbing the rage that was bubbling up inside me. I downed the glass in one go. The burn was sharp and quick, but it didn't help. It didn't soothe the hurt. It didn't erase the way my heart had cracked when I saw that post, the empty, hollow feeling in my chest. The fact that my own family had decided I wasn't worth celebrating, worth even a simple acknowledgement. They thought I wouldn't care. They thought I'd just shrug it off like I always did. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had spent too many years letting them walk all over me, telling myself that their neglect didn't matter, telling myself that it was just the way life was. But now I knew better. Now I saw through the cracks of their facade. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that they had left me behind, or the fact that I had let myself believe they wouldn't, that I had let myself hope. I had spent weeks thinking about how they might surprise me, imagining them gathering together to show me that they cared, but none of that was real. They didn't care. They didn't need me. And now the emptiness in the house matched the emptiness I felt inside. I grabbed my phone again, the screen flickering in my hand. I couldn't help myself. I opened the Instagram app once more, searching through the posts from the past few hours, my eyes narrowing at each new photo that popped up. There they were, Emma, Mia, and Alex, all laughing and smiling like everything was perfect, like nothing had ever happened, like I wasn't sitting at home alone, abandoned on my birthday. I clenched my fist around the phone. The last post was a video. Mia laughing with a cocktail in hand, sitting on the beach in what looked like paradise. The sun setting behind them, the water sparkling in the distance. It was all too perfect. It wasn't just a family vacation. It was a slap in my face, a reminder that while I sat here with a broken heart, they were enjoying life without a single thought of me. I didn't even know what to feel anymore. Anger. Yes, I was angry. But there was something else, something darker that gnawed at my insides. I wasn't even worth a message, not even a phone call. They didn't even bother to send a simple text to check on me. It was as if I didn't matter at all. For the first time in years, I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know how to move forward with the family. I had spent so much of my life holding together. I had given everything I had to them, every ounce of my energy, my time, my patience, and this was the thanks I got. The worst part, I had let them. I had let them treat me like this for so long that I had become invisible to them. A background character in the story of their lives. I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to make sense of it. I kept telling myself it wasn't personal, that it wasn't about me, that maybe they were just caught up in their own lives. But deep down, I knew the truth. It was personal. I wasn't a priority, and the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. They had decided long ago that I was no longer important, no longer a part of their world. They had replaced me with their own version of what a perfect family should be. I took another drink. I wasn't trying to drown my sorrows in whiskey. I wasn't trying to forget what had happened. No, this wasn't about escape. This was about facing it. I needed to face the reality of what had been done to me. I wasn't their joke anymore. I wasn't going to let them laugh at my expense. Not anymore. And that's when I knew I had to do something. I had to make them see that I wasn't invisible, that I wasn't just a tool for them to use when they needed something. I had been so quiet for so long, but I couldn't be quiet anymore. I couldn't let them continue to walk all over me. Not without consequences. I grabbed my laptop from the coffee table, opened it, and began typing. The wake-up call. setting boundaries and drawing the line. The sound of the keys clicking on the laptop was the only thing filling the silence of the house. It felt strangely comforting, like I was finally doing something for myself after years of sacrificing everything for everyone else. The pages in front of me were filled with evident screenshots of Instagram posts, photos of my family laughing on their perfect vacation, and most damning of all, bank statements that revealed everything. The withdrawals, the sneaky charges, the money that had been spent without my knowledge or consent. It wasn't just about money. No, it was more than that. It was about trust. It was about respect. And in the end, it was about me. How I had let myself become invisible to the people who should have cared for me the most. I couldn't believe it had taken me this long to see the truth. But here I was looking at the cold, hard facts. I had to confront them. It wasn't a choice anymore. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a pattern I had been too blind to notice for years. I started with Belle, the woman I had spent decades with, the woman I thought I knew. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. I couldn't just keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. The plan was simple, really. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to make them see what they had done. No more hiding behind their excuses. No more pretending that everything was okay. I wasn't going to let them sweep this under the rug. I shut my laptop, the weight of the folder I had created, a folder that now held the broken pieces of my family pressed down on me. It was time to confront them. No more running away. The first thing I did was change the locks. It was a symbolic gesture more than anything else, but it was important. It was my way of saying that things were different now, that I wasn't just going to let them walk back into my life without facing the consequences of their actions. I wasn't kicking them out, at least not yet, but I was taking control of what had been taken from me. I had been so focused on being the provider, the caretaker, the one who always kept everything together. But now I was standing up for myself. For the first time in my life, I was putting myself first. The sound of the new deadbolt clicking into place echoed in the silence, and for the first time in days, I felt a strange sense of power. It wasn't the kind of power that came from control or dominance, but the power that came from setting boundaries, from making it clear that I wasn't going to let them treat me like an afterthought anymore. By the time I finished, I could feel the anger, know the hurt pulsing through my veins. The hurt wasn't just from being left behind. It wasn't just from the lies or the secrets. It was from the years of feeling like I wasn't enough, of always being the one who had to keep everything together while they took advantage of my silence. It was time for them to hear it, and they would. The next day, Belle came downstairs, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She paused in the doorway, watching me as I packed up my things. I was getting ready to go to work, but something in her posture told me she was waiting for me to say something. Anything to give her a chance to explain. "Julian," she said, her voice shaky. "What are you doing?" I didn't look up as I finished gathering my things, making sure I'm not invisible anymore. I replied, my voice calm but firm. She didn't seem to know how to react. She stood there, mouth slightly open, like she was expecting me to break. But I wasn't going to break. Not anymore. Not for her. I grabbed my keys and walked past her, heading toward the door. "Wait!" she called out, stepping in front of me. "Julian, please don't do this. We can fix this." I looked at her, my eyes cold. "Fix it?" I asked, shaking my head. "You don't fix something you broke on purpose." I opened the door, the weight of my decision settling over me like a blanket. "You've had your chance. I'm done being the one who has to fix everything." I stepped outside, leaving her standing there lost and alone. But I wasn't alone anymore, not in the way I used to be. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Work errands the usual. But everything felt different now. I felt different. I had taken control of my own life for the first time in a long time, and no matter how hard they tried to explain themselves, no matter how much they begged for forgiveness, I knew I wasn't going to let them back in so easily. By the time I returned home that evening, the house was quiet. It was strange how different it felt. Empty, yes, but also peaceful. There was no tension hanging in the air, no pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. Skylar came downstairs later, her eyes still red from earlier, but there was something different in the way she looked at me. It was like she saw me, really saw me for the first time in years. "Dad," she said quietly, her voice small, "I don't want you to think I don't care. I know I've been a part of all this, but I never meant to hurt you." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, feeling the weight of everything. "I know, kid," I replied softly. but you've got to show me that you mean it." She didn't argue. She just nodded. And for the first time, I felt like maybe we were starting to rebuild. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. The next few days passed in a fog of tension. The house, once bustling with the noise of family, had become a cold, silent shell. Julian went about his days with a steady, quiet resolve. But beneath the surface, there was a storm brewing. The anger, the betrayal, the hurt. He could feel them all simmering just below the surface, waiting to erupt. But he wasn't going to let it. Not yet. Instead, he chose to sit with his feelings, to let them wash over him like waves, but never allowing them to overtake him. His decision to change the locks and set firm boundaries was just the beginning. Julian had never been the type to show his emotions openly. He wasn't the yelling, raging type. He was the quiet one, the one who internalized everything. But this time, it was different. This time, he wasn't going to let his family think he was the same old pushover, the one who would bend and give in to their every whim. No, he had made up his mind. He wasn't going to be invisible anymore. But the silence in the house felt heavier with each passing day. As he sat at the kitchen table sipping his coffee, Julian couldn't help but feel the weight of the emptiness around him. It wasn't just the physical absence of Belle and the kids. It was the emotional void they had left behind. He hadn't expected things to be easy, but he hadn't expected the sharp pang of loneliness either. He thought about the times he had put his family first, how he had always prioritized their needs over his own. The late nights working overtime to pay for Skylar's college, the weekends spent fixing things around the house to make sure everything was running smoothly. He had given everything, but it had never been enough. He had given his time, his energy, his love, only to be left behind, left in the dark on his 40th birthday as his family had chosen everything else over him. Belle, on the other hand, was trapped in her own silent struggle. The week after their confrontation had left her in a daze. Julian's words had cut through her like a knife, and the reality of what she had done, what she had allowed to happen, had finally hit her full force. She couldn't escape the guilt. Every time she saw her reflection in the mirror, she saw a woman who had betrayed her husband, her family, and herself. She had let Greg and Michelle's influence push her into making decisions that went against everything she had once believed in. She had allowed her father's selfishness and disregard for Julian's feelings to pull her into a web of lies and deceit. She had taken her family for granted, and now she was paying the price. But what truly stung was the silence from Julian. The distance. The coldness. She had never seen him so closed off, so unreachable. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't throwing things or demanding answers. He was just quiet. And it terrified her. Because for the first time she didn't know how to fix it. She didn't know how to make him look at her the way he used to, like she was his partner, his equal. She tried to reach out, of course, a message here, a phone call there, but nothing. It was like he was a million miles away, even though they were living under the same roof. She wasn't sure if he was angry, hurt, or just resigned to the fact that their marriage had been a lie for far too long. All she knew was that the man she had once known her best friend, her confidant, was slipping through her fingers, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Skylar, their daughter, was in a similar emotional turmoil. She hadn't expected her parents to fall apart like this. Sure, there had been tension before, but nothing like this. She could feel the coldness in the house, the unspoken anger that hung in the air. But what hurt the most was the way her father was treating her. The silence between them was suffocating. Her heart ached for him. She knew he was hurting, but she didn't know how to fix it. She had always been the one to try to keep the peace, to make sure everyone was okay, but this time she couldn't. Her father wasn't the man he used to be, not the smiling, easygoing guy who would play her favorite songs on the guitar or take her to get ice cream on a whim. Now he was distant, a shadow of the man she had looked up to her entire life. And then there was Maddox, her brother. He was the one who had seemed to slip through the cracks, and Skylar couldn't shake the feeling that he was avoiding her, avoiding everyone. He wasn't the rebellious teenager anymore. No, now he was just gone. His smug little grin had disappeared, replaced with a guarded, almost cold demeanor. She could see the guilt eating away at him, but she didn't know how to help him either. The rebellion, though, wasn't just coming from Julian. It wasn't just his refusal to be taken for granted anymore. His decision to put his foot down had triggered something in him, something he hadn't realized had been building for years. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the surprise trip to the resort. It was about his identity, his worth. and for the first time he realized he didn't have to live his life for anyone else. He didn't have to be the one who sacrificed everything for a family that never appreciated him. He thought about the times Belle had promised him that they would change, that they would make things work. But deep down, Julian knew that nothing would ever truly change, not unless he made the change himself. And so, with that realization, he began to rebuild slowly but surely. The process wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And in that silence, Julian realized that he wasn't just surviving. He was reclaiming himself. As the days wore on, the unspoken words between them all began to pile up. Belle's attempts at reaching out grew less frequent. Skylar's quiet heartache became harder to hide. And Maddox was still lost in his own guilt, trying to find a way back to his father's good graces without fully understanding the depth of the damage he had caused. For Julian, it wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what hadn't been said, all the words left unspoken, the promises that had been broken, the expectations that had been placed on him, and the ones he had unknowingly placed on himself. But now, for the first time in his life, Julian wasn't afraid to let go of the expectations. He was finally free to find his own way. The anger was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, but he wasn't going to let it consume him. Not anymore. As Julian sat in the quiet of his home, the house that once felt like a prison, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of freedom. And with that freedom came the strength to move forward, no matter how hard it would be. This was just the beginning. Julian knew it, Belle knew it, Skylar knew it, and Maddox. He was still figuring it out. But one thing was clear. The days of being invisible were over. The days of being taken for granted were over. Julian wasn't just going to survive, he was going to thrive. The next chapter of his life was waiting for him, and this time, he was going to write it on his own terms. The moment of truth. For the next few days, the tension in the house was unbearable. The walls that had once felt like a safe haven now seemed to close in around me, the silence echoing like a loud reminder of everything that had gone wrong. I couldn't escape the feeling that everything I thought I knew about my family had been a lie, built on years of secrets and unspoken resentment. It was hard to look at Claire. Every time I saw her, there was this weight in the air, something thick and suffocating between us. She was always around, but never really present. Her eyes would glance at me when she thought I wasn't looking. But the look was different, like she was waiting for something, or perhaps hoping that I would be the one to break the silence first. But I couldn't. Not yet. In the evenings when the kids were in bed, I would sit in the living room staring at the empty space where once, just a few months ago, we had sat together as a family. Now the space felt too big, too empty. I missed the noise, the sound of the kids arguing over something trivial, the casual chatter that used to fill the room. Now it was just silence, the kind of silence that made everything louder, every crack in the foundation of our family more noticeable. One evening as I sat there lost in thought, Claire walked in. She had this hesitant look on her face as though she wasn't sure if she should be there or not. She stood at the door for a moment before speaking, her voice small but carrying the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. "James," she started, her voice quivering slightly. "I know this isn't easy for you, but we need to talk." I didn't look at her immediately. Instead, I stared out the window, watching the last few rays of sunlight dip below the horizon. I couldn't bring myself to face her, not yet. But hearing her say it out loud was enough to break the dam I'd been trying to hold back. "We don't need to talk." "Claire," I said, my voice low but firm. "Not until I understand what happened. Until I know what you've been hiding from me all this time." Her face softened and she stepped closer, her hands clasped tightly together. "James, please. This isn't easy for me either. But I wasn't hiding anything. I didn't know how to tell you." I turned to face her then, and for the first time in a long while I allowed myself to look at her, not with anger or bitterness, but with the sadness of a man who had realized that the life he thought he had wasn't real. "You think that's enough?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "You think telling me you didn't know how to tell me makes all this go away? All the lies, all the secrets, everything?" Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak right away. Instead, she took a deep breath as if gathering herself before speaking the words she knew would change everything. "James, I never meant for it to get this far, but I felt trapped, like I was living in this perfect world that wasn't mine. I was too afraid to tell you how I felt. Too afraid to break what we had, even if it was all just a facade." I took a step back, feeling the weight of her words settle in my chest. This was what I had feared, wasn't it? That the truth would be something so much bigger than what I had imagined. that everything we had built together, our family, our home, had been nothing but a fragile illusion. The truth hit harder than I ever could have prepared for. For a long time, we just stood there, neither of us speaking, both of us lost in the weight of the reality we had to face. Finally, Claire spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, James. For everything, I don't know how to fix it, but I need you to know, I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't know where to turn anymore." I closed my eyes, fighting the tears that threatened to break free. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. None of this was what I imagined when I thought about family, about the life we were supposed to share. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Claire," I said quietly. "I don't know if I even want to try." The words felt like a weight on my tongue, but I had to say them. I had to admit to myself that what we had, the family I thought we were, was gone. And with that realization came a deep, gnawing emptiness that I couldn't shake off. Claire didn't respond. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if she had already accepted the fact that this might be the end. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the shattered pieces of everything I had believed in. But as she left, I realized something else too. The decision to rebuild, to try and find a way forward, had to come from me. I couldn't wait for her to fix this. I had to do it myself, and it wouldn't be easy. I stood up, feeling a new sense of resolve building inside me. Whatever happened, whatever came next, I wasn't going to let this break me. I would rebuild. I had to. The family I thought I knew may be gone, but I wasn't finished yet, and neither was Claire. Rebuilding from the ashes. The days that followed Claire's confession were a blur. I moved through them like a ghost, my body present but my mind elsewhere, processing everything I had just learned. It was impossible to escape the feeling of betrayal, of everything I had known collapsing around me. But as the hours passed, something else began to shift within me. A quiet, determined resolve. I couldn't remain in the wreckage forever. I couldn't keep blaming Claire for her actions, even if they were devastating. I had to rebuild not just the life we had together, but my own sense of self. This was no longer about saving a marriage. It was about saving myself. The house felt emptier than ever. It was as if the walls were closing in, pressing against me with the weight of everything unspoken, every fracture in our family. The echo of footsteps in the hallway felt like a reminder of the distance between us, the fact that things could never go back to how they were. But instead of curling into the pain, I started to take action. I would fix what I could. I would rebuild. One morning I woke up early, the first rays of sunlight creeping through the window. The air was still, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the heavy weight of guilt or anger looming over me. Instead, there was this strange clarity, like a clean slate, an opportunity to change the course of my life. I stood in the kitchen sipping my coffee, and as I gazed out the window, I realized something important. I had been focusing too much on what I had lost, on Claire's secrets, and our broken relationship. But in that moment, I understood that what mattered now was what I could gain from this. I had the chance to rediscover myself, to rebuild a life that wasn't defined by the mistakes of others. I spent the next few days focusing on small but significant changes. I started with the house. It had felt like a mausoleum for far too long, a place where the past and its pain lingered in every room. I cleared out the clutter, old boxes filled with forgotten memories, furniture that no longer felt right, and began creating a space that was my own. I painted the living room, changed the layout of the furniture, and hung up a few new pieces of artwork, things that reflected who I was now, not the man I had been when Claire and I first built this life together. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about taking control of the future. At work, I threw myself into my projects. My job had always been a steady part of my life, something I could rely on. But now it became more than that. It became an escape. I focused on pushing my career forward, making new connections, taking on challenging tasks. I remembered who I was outside of being a husband and father, outside of the person who had tried so hard to make everyone happy. And then there was Skylar. She had been different lately, quieter than before, but there was a subtle change in her, a willingness to show up, to try. I had been waiting for her to make the first move, for her to apologize. But as I sat at the kitchen table one evening, I realized that I had been waiting for all the wrong things. Skylar wasn't going to come to me with grand words or promises. She would come to me with actions, with the simple, small things she could offer. So I reached out to her. I asked her how her day had been, and I made sure she knew I was there for her no matter what. Skylar had always been the bridge between me and Claire, the one who could see both sides, and I realized that I had to meet her where she was. A week later, I had a surprise. After a long day of work, I walked into the kitchen to find Skylar sitting at the table with a mug of tea in her hands. The faint smell of something baking lingered in the air. She looked up as I entered, a small, tentative smile on her face. "Hey, Dad," she said quietly. "I made you some cookies." I paused, surprised. I hadn't expected anything like this. No apologies, no heavy conversations, just a simple gesture of care. But in that moment, it meant everything. "Thanks, Skylar," I said, my voice a little hoarse. I sat down across from her, the warmth of the moment almost making up for the emptiness of the past weeks. "How's school going?" She shrugged, but looked at me with a sincerity I hadn't seen before. "It's fine, I'm trying to keep up with everything." She paused, glancing down at the cookies. "I know things are hard right now, for you, for all of us." I nodded. There was so much left unsaid, but I didn't need to say it all. The truth was in the little things, this moment of quiet togetherness, her willingness to be present. I'm not saying I understand everything, but I want to. I want us to be okay again. Not like before, but something new. Skylar added, her voice barely above a whisper. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not because everything was fixed, not because Claire and I had made up, but because Skylar was reaching out. She was trying. And that was enough. As we sat there sharing cookies and talking about nothing in particular, I realized that this new way forward wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way I could rebuild piece by piece and find the kind of family I'd always dreamed of. Maybe not the one I'd thought I had, but one that was real, raw, and capable of growth. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. The new chapter. It had been a month since I began the process of rebuilding. One day, as I stood in front of the mirror running a hand through my hair, I realized something. The man who stared back at me wasn't the same person who had been so eager to please, to hold on to a family that had slowly drifted away. I was different. Stronger. Not perfect, but definitely stronger. I was making progress, slow, steady, and painful at times, but progress nonetheless. I was learning to put myself first, to accept that I didn't need to carry the weight of everyone's problems, and that I could still be a father, even if my family wasn't whole. This new version of me wasn't defined by the mistakes or the betrayals. It was defined by how I chose to move forward, even if the road was uncertain. One evening after a long day at work, I sat down on the couch with a cold beer in hand, a feeling of quiet satisfaction filling me as I stared out at the empty street. It was strange, this feeling of peace that I hadn't known in such a long time. I had spent years trying to hold everything together, trying to keep a family intact. But now I understood that sometimes the best thing you can do is let go and trust that things will fall into place one way or another. I wasn't angry anymore. Not the loud, fiery kind of anger that burned with resentment. No, my anger had simmered down into something more manageable, more purposeful. It was a quiet force, a determination to move forward with or without the people who once filled my life. Claire had made her choice, and I had made mine. I wouldn't be held back anymore. I couldn't afford to be. The phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Skylar texting me that she'd be home in 20 minutes. I smiled as I read the message, grateful for the bond we were slowly rebuilding. It had taken time, but Skylar had started to show up no longer just as a daughter who needed her father, but as someone who understood the complexity of what I had gone through. She was maturing into a young woman who wasn't afraid to face the hard truths, to see her parents for who they really were. I admired her strength. The door opened a few minutes later and Skylar walked in looking tired but content. She had a cup of coffee in her hand and a light sweater draped around her shoulders. There was a brief moment where we simply looked at each other, neither of us needing to speak. It was a silent understanding, a knowing that we were both navigating the same storm, but in different ways. "Hey, Dad," she said softly, sitting down beside me. She placed the coffee on the table and sighed, her shoulders sinking into the couch. "I've been thinking a lot about everything about you and Mom." I nodded, unsure of where this conversation was going, but prepared to listen. "I get it now," she continued, her voice steady. "What you were trying to do, what you've been trying to hold on to, and I'm sorry for not seeing it before." Her eyes met mine, searching for any sign of forgiveness, and in that moment, I knew we were finally breaking through the barriers that had divided us for so long. "You don't have to apologize, Skylar," I said quietly. "I know this hasn't been easy for you either, but I'm glad you're here now. That's what matters. We'll figure it out. Together." Her eyes softened and she smiled, a quiet weight lifting from her shoulders. The strained relationship we once had was slowly transforming into something more real, more authentic. There was still a long road ahead, but it didn't seem so impossible anymore. Later that evening, as I sat in the kitchen finishing up some work, I received a message from Maddox. It had been weeks since we last spoke, and I hadn't been sure if he would ever come back, if he would ever face the consequences of his actions. But he had sent me a simple text. "Can we talk, Dad?" I stared at the message for a while, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. Maddox had hurt me, no question. But deep down, I knew he was still my son, and part of me believed that he could still change. It would take time, but he could find his way back. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I wasn't going to close the door on him, not yet. I sent a quick reply. "Of course, come by whenever you're ready." The doorbell rang later that night, and I could hear the familiar creak of the wood as Maddox stepped into the house. His eyes were downcast, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket. He looked older, more worn, but there was something else there. A quiet vulnerability I hadn't seen in him before. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice quieter than usual. He stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure of what to do. "Can we talk?" "Yeah," I replied, motioning for him to come in. "Let's talk." We sat down at the kitchen table, just the two of us. I didn't push him for answers or explanations. I didn't need them. Not yet. What mattered now was that he was here, that he was willing to show up, even if it was in his own time. Maddox didn't apologize, not in so many words, but his presence said it all. He was finally facing what he had done, and that was a start. I know I messed up," he said, his voice low. "I just didn't know how to handle everything. I didn't want to face it, and I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. But I was wrong." I nodded, listening, giving him the space to process and speak. "You don't have to fix everything right now, Maddox. Just show up when you can. That's all I'm asking." "I can do that," he said, finally looking up at me. "I'm sorry, Dad. I messed up." The words felt like a small victory, a step in the right direction. The days that followed were filled with small conversations, tentative but meaningful steps toward healing. Skylar continued to visit more often, and even though Maddox didn't come every day, I could feel the shift in him. There was more honesty between us now, more openness, and it was in those moments that I realized I wasn't alone. I didn't need Claire's approval or her presence to be whole. I had my kids and I had myself. I wasn't the man I used to be, the one who begged for validation, who sacrificed everything for a family that didn't see him. I was the man who learned to stand on his own 2 feet, who recognized his worth, and who refused to be anyone's second choice. And as I watched Skylar and Maddox slowly find their way back to me, I knew that no matter what happened next, I had built something solid from the wreckage, a life that was mine, and a family that was willing to try, even if it meant starting from scratch. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was enough.